All right. Well, welcome everyone. This is what we call going with the flow, right? So we were going to live stream this in the Facebook group, and it's not working. Facebook isn't taking the connection for some reason. Maybe it's a busy Friday with live streaming, but I'm super excited here to be with you guys today with Brian. Thank you, Brian, for volunteering.
Thank you.
And so what we're going to do today is I'm just going to coach Brian. Neither one of us has any idea how this is going to go. It's not rehearsed. It's not scripted. Brian, you can bring up, anything that comes up for you, whatever you're thinking about now, or whatever comes to you as we start talking.
Sure, of course.
I want to do two things in this, really three, I guess. One is to give you the value of a coaching session.
Mm-hmm.
Two is to give everyone the value of just seeing what it's like. A lot of people, a lot of people wonder, like, what is it really like to be coached? And, is that really worth it? Like, why spend money on something like that? Or, whatever. And so I hope that you see today some of the value that's in a private one-on-one session. Mm-hmm. And because there's nothing like it. I don't know if anybody saw, but I think it was just this last week on 60 Minutes, they did an interview with Brene Brown, who's someone I love and respect very much. And she's very big in the self-help world, leadership development. She is a shame researcher and vulnerability researcher, has written a number of bestsellers. Anyway, in this interview, he asked her something about self-help, and she goes, oh, well, like, self-help is bullshit. I think she even said bullshit, or maybe she said it doesn't work, whatever. And he was like, what? Because here's this sort of self-help person. Oh, I know what it was about. He was saying people could find her books in the self-help department of a bookstore. And she was like, yeah, I hate that. I hate self-help, and he's like, what? And she said, yeah, because we are not meant to do this alone. Yeah. Life is not meant, to be lived alone, to try to navigate all the change that, we go through in a life alone. And that just really spoke to me, because I've thought a number of times in the last year or so about writing a book about, self-help not working. But anyway, so I hope that everybody gets sort of this feeling of the benefit of working with somebody one-on-one. And I also just want to encourage you as we go through this today, whatever, stories or situations or whatever it is that Brian has may be completely different from yours. And so, are you a police officer?
No, I'm college admissions.
College admissions. Oh, I don't know why I thought you were a police officer. There you go.
Probably because I look like one.
Completely different than that. Okay, so
I get that all the time. I tried to be a police officer, but no, I work in college admissions.
Okay, so you could be telling us, something about what happened with a student or whatever, that somebody else is like, oh, well, I don't have that in my life. That's not my story. Or something with kids and they don't have kids, or, whatever. And if you just stay with it and listen for the dynamic that's going on through the story, sort of beyond the story, I'm sure will find something in your life that you can relate to, whatever dynamic it is that we're talking about, because we all really have the same things. They just manifest in little individual experiences and stories, but they come from kind of the same, general places. And so with that, we will dive in. So did you have something, that you had thought of that you'd like to talk about today?
I mean, a lot of the things that I deal with come from just self-esteem issues from years and years and years. Like I said, I tried to make a transition into law enforcement, was unsuccessful with that. Before I got back into college admissions, that I've been doing for about 9 to 10 years. Okay. I worked doing talent acquisition for a local casino for a few years. That was one that kind of really tested me. The work environment was very tough. It ended up being kind of a little bit of a toxic work environment. It kind of messed with my head a little bit.
Okay.
And that's how I found my way back into college admissions, because I really, truly love that field of work. Right now I work at a community college. I work at the City Community College in Philadelphia. So vastly different audience that when I worked with before, I was working at some mainline private liberal arts institutions. So definitely a full shift of what I was going through. But a lot of it is just self-esteem issues, trying to be positive, managing anxieties, especially in such a unique situation like this. For me, I'm usually the one who's out working in the office, whereas, my wife, she does real estate. So she's working from home, but balancing the kids. So now I'm working from home, trying to help her out best I can. And, and not trying to lose my cool and go off on the kids, that sort of thing. So I think it's a little bit of managing anxiety and some of the confidence issues that I've struggled with, most of my life.
Yeah. So let's go there for a second. How would you describe what feels like kind of the core of those self-esteem issues? Like, how does that come out?
I think growing up, a lot of it was my size. I've always been, I'm not the tallest person in the world. I'm 6'3", so I'm taller, but it's always been just my size. I've always been a big person, always struggled with the weight. It's always been, since college, and even before then, it's just, I've always been a big person. So I've dealt with the ridicule there, and kind of for years just kind of swallowed it like a lot of people do, and then have an outburst and that sort of thing. So that's where a lot of it comes from. And then, later in life, it was just, making sure that I was being a good parent, being a good provider, being a good husband. Trips and stumbles there really kind of felt like it set me back, when in reality it was probably it was probably a lesson to be learned. But, to me, it felt like it was messing with the confidence that I had began to build. So,
if we go back to your size, and I think this is an issue that pretty much all of us can relate to in one way or another. I'll never forget, I was at a retreat myself up at the Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, New York. It's sort of an adult, well, they take kids program, but mostly adult, kind of spiritual retreat center. And I've gone to a bunch of retreats there. I can't even remember which one I was at, but anyway, this woman who's very thin. Now I'm big too. So I'm 5'10".
Yeah.
And, so for a woman, I'm pretty big, and I'm certainly not like naturally thin. I don't have a lot of weight. I don't really, whatever. I don't think of myself as having weight problems, but I probably also have 20, somebody else would probably say I have 20 or 30 pounds on me,
sure.
But when you're 5'10", you can kind of spread it out,
you spread it out.
but I'm a big person, and I noticed it like the other night we were doing virtual happy hour with a couple girlfriends, and I'm looking at the size of my head. Like, I don't know if you do this, but like I'm looking at the size of my head compared to the people around me, and I'm like, I'm huge. Like, I think I'm huge. But anyway, I was at this retreat, and this woman was just talking about all sorts of shame and pain that she carried around being so thin.
Yeah.
And she was like, this is my body. Like, there's nothing I'm not dieting. I'm not, her body was naturally thin. So we all have this temple, this body that we come into the world with, and no two of them are the same.
Yeah.
And yet there's so much culture, at least in the West, and I suspect this is true around much of the world, where somehow it's supposed to look a certain way, or at least you're supposed to blend in, right? So when you're the biggest one, like I was always the biggest one in my class, boys, boys included, then you start to feel like you don't fit.
Yeah.
Right. And it sets you up for that ridicule or for bullying or whatever. Yeah. So and then we all interpret that just a little bit differently. Like there's a commonality there, but there are some differences. So when that was happening to you, when did it, like, how old were you when you can remember?
I think it was always through, but I think elementary school is really when it kind of, because in elementary school, when I was probably one of the biggest kids, that's when you're one, there's 30 kids in the class and you're the biggest one in the class, so it's obviously an odd man out.
Yeah.
and then through college, I was in a fraternity, which I loved. I absolutely loved the experience. But in a fraternity, it's like any group of guys who get together. You're just shit talking.
Yeah.
You're busting people's humps. And sometimes it might have went a little too far, and we, called each other out on it. But sometimes, it still hurts. And I think I
Yes.
just sort of internalized it. And I'm like, oh well, these are my buddies, and it's okay. But I think that hurt more than it did anything else.
Yeah. 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 I think that's such a great point, because it's very easy, and this applies to a lot of things going on right now. It's very easy to like try to rationalize to ourselves that something isn't important, or something they didn't mean it. They didn't, whatever, or whatever excuses that we make. And yet the hurt of it gets internalized.
Yeah.
Because while we may have sort of let the other person off the hook, nothing's been done to resolve that jab, or that whatever those words or experience was that came at you.
And you can turn away from it, but then you go to look in the mirror and you're like, oh well, I'm still here.
Yes.
Then you start thinking about it more, and you're like, okay, well, it really did hurt, but I'm here by myself now trying to deal with this.
Yes. So when you're in that place where you're feeling, I'm by myself and I'm got to deal with this, and even if you need to kind of go back in time to another time, that you can think of that was where this really got triggered, what were the thoughts that were going through your mind?
Sometimes it was like, like I said before, it was, they're my buddies, like these are some of my closest friends. We're just joking around. We're just having a good time. And then other times, you're in a different situation and you get back, and my thought is like, wow, like, okay, yeah, I am overweight. I could probably stand to lose a couple pounds, and then you start looking deeper and you're like, oh my gosh, like, is this going to affect the job I have? Is this going to affect the life I lead? And you start really going, and I'm sure you've approached this before with many people. You just rationalize and just go crazy. You just start thinking these insane thoughts that probably don't have any meaning at that time.
Right.
And you're just, and your mind just runs wild.
Yeah. Projecting negative things into the future.
Like, I'm never going to get a job, I'm never going to, I'm never this, that, and the other thing. Like, oh, probably silly things, but, at that moment, you're like, this is true. This is all going to come true.
Yes. So one of the things, I like that you just said it that way, because that's one of the things about anxiety versus wisdom. So when you're in anxiety, you'll get a lot of thoughts thrown at you. Like, you're never going to get the job you want, probably who's going to fall in love with you. You're not going to be able to have the family you want, whatever, all these things. And that part of your mind, and it's usually moving very fast, right? Thoughts are coming at you really fast, and it feels so true, so true, so true. This is true. And if it's something like a job or something where you're trying to plan or think of, you're going to look for jobs, you're going to do, then your options, right, seem very narrow, and nothing seems like it's going to work, and all those things. And so that's just one of those, that's a cluster of things that are the telltale signs of anxiety.
Yeah.
That it's very black and white. It's very rigid, right? Like it isn't like, oh, well, I can think of a dozen different things I could do with 10 extra pounds on me, or whatever. There's no lightness to it. There's no, there's only one or two things, and it all feels heavy. And in your body, even when you think about that, not now, can you feel in your body kind of how that the sensations that creates? So describe those to me.
It comes back to you, and it also, and going a little bit farther ahead in time, it came back to me when I, like I said, when I always go back to this example, and I think my wife hates it at this point because she's happy I'm not a cop. but but it comes back to me because I lost a job at one of the schools I worked at. They eliminated my position. So it was right before Christmas time. I lost a job. I have 2 young kids. And I'm like, you know what? I want to change careers. I want to be a police officer. So I start training and I start doing all this stuff. And then the weight thing comes back with me because I'm going to take all these physical fitness tests and I'm failing them. So so my anxiety, my confidence is shot. I'm beating myself up. I'm saying I can't do this. But in my head, I'm still trying to tell myself I can do the career of be a police officer and do the work, but I just can't get over this hurdle of getting in the door, essentially. So that really damaged any work that I had been doing to that point to boost my confidence and to relieve my anxiety. And it really got to a point where it was just like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. So then you have to sort of figure out how to accept that disappointment.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly, Brenda, I still struggle with that to this day. And even though this world is not a world we'll say it's not a super pro law enforcement world like it was 10, 20 years ago, and the way, things shake out and, God forbid, cops get killed. So it's one of those things where I look at it and I'm happy that my cards fell like that, but at the same time, I still struggle with it, knowing that I have friends of mine that are police officers and family that I could do it, but it just didn't work out for me. But maybe the plan wasn't for me to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think that one, I just want to, first of all, just stop and sort of congratulate you on the really, wise and sort of definitely emotionally intelligent way you're trying to look at this.
Yeah.
And not becoming just super victimized by it.
And I did. And my wife got to a point too where she was like, look, you have to stop this. You're not doing any good for yourself. And that's why I love her and I hate her so much sometimes because she's so blunt and, she's so wonderful and keeps everything together. But that bluntness sometimes I'm just like, I wish you would just agree with me, but I know that she's doing what she thinks.
Yeah. But I think I love that. And you're right. And you're lucky to have a spouse that is in that journey with you. And, it's both, I think you're totally right. And it's the best of times and worst of times all at once. Right. And, but knowing they're coming from a place of love, like not everybody has that. So, for those of you who are not in that situation, because I've been there, that's different. But when you have somebody who's really coming at it from a place of love and saying, honey, don't let this, take you down.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And another person can't resolve these things within us. And so it is like I have my daughter-in-law who I'm super grateful to have, an awesome daughter-in-law, and she'll, like any of us, she'll struggle with some stuff. And my son, she will be the first to say that my son is the best, like the best husband. He's so good at supporting her, which of course also makes me super happy. But but at the end of the day, then we'll talk about it. It's like, but you have to figure out your own thing. Like it's awesome you have an awesome spouse, right? Yep. But we each are on our own journey and have to figure out our own thing.
Oh, yeah.
So I'd love to kind of, if you're willing to sort of just play with this and see what happens, I'd love to sort of go back to this in a way, just because I'd love for you to find that place where you can so we're not going to try to change reality and we're not going to try to sugarcoat it. Okay. So you're taking those physical tests, to get into the academy or whatever, and you're failing them, but where we can replay it or redesign it so that it's not as diminishing to you.
Sure.
Is that, I mean, is diminishing a good way to say
Yeah,
it? That
yeah. I think, and the tough part about it, Brenda, to be honest, was um, I was putting in the work the outside of what the testing standards were. I was working out. I had lost some weight. Now, by this time when I started testing, I did get that job at the casino doing the talent acquisition, and I was the only person doing the recruiting there for the job. So it was very taxing work. So I really had to find the balance between work, doing that work, and then being with the family. And I think what I did is I took it to the extreme, and I focused on my professional work, and then I really focused on the other thing because that was my goal and that's what I wanted. And when other things suffered, and still to this day, and Jen would say the same thing, we're still working on things. There was damage done by me being so focused for what I thought was the ultimate goal, but in reality wasn't the ultimate goal.
Yeah. Okay. So what does that, so what did you say to yourself when you were so focused on that, okay, to the exclusion, it sounds like, in large degree of your family, because that was the goal.
Yeah.
What were the kinds of messages you were saying to yourself in your head? Like the justifications or the,
things like, I know I can do this work. I have the credentials to do this. I'm putting in the physical work to get in shape and do the best I can. And ultimately the big thing I kept saying, like my mantra was just, you can do this. You know what I mean? Like, and I think too, some of it was like, you look to see, and I would compare. The problem that I have internally, another thing, is I have this problem comparing.
Of course.
I'm sure everybody does. And I was like, oh.
Everyone does.
And I was like, if that guy can be a cop, I can be a cop. Yeah. And I'm like, but there's like his backstory where he's been in it for 10 years and, he might be divorced and this, that, and, a litany of other things, different time frame. So that was another stumbling block, is that I was always comparing myself. But in my head, I was like, that's motivation. So.
Right. Okay. So then when you didn't make it, at whatever point you knew, you weren't going to be able to get into the academy.
It was a year. My wife and I gave myself a year.
Okay.
And at the end of that year, it was just like, it was like a dead stop. It was like, you've got to give this up. Like, it's not going to work out. And I was testing everywhere. I was doing national, I was doing federal law enforcement organizations.
Okay.
I was doing local. So I was having to go into the city to take time out of work to take this test. And the one test that I failed was the same day of my son's like second or third birthday. So I was like rushing to Northeast Philly, failing that, and then having to rush home and get in the car and go set up for a birthday party. So it was taking a lot of time.
Yeah.
So it was.
So when you didn't get it, when you got to that point and you decided, okay, it's over, I'm going to stop.
Yeah. What
were the critical things that you were saying to yourself about it?
Well, first feeling I had was heartbroken. I was heartbroken. But what I was saying to myself was, you failed, you positive wise, I said, you put in a lot of effort, you lost weight, you got in a better shape. But all the negative things outweighed all the positive things.
Absolutely.
And I was like, you failed, you couldn't do this, you'll never be able to do this, now you're going to be too old. So it was a lot of bad things, I was saying.
Yeah. So, and I don't know if this feels counterintuitive, but I think that one of the reasons why things that are disappointments in life end up hanging with us and creating those real dings in our confidence, where it's just like, wow, that was just a huge setback, and in a way we don't necessarily, we really don't recover from it. Then we just kind of, our bar for now what confidence feels like to me is a little lower. because I was here, or I had my sights for here, and then this happened, and now that's not even in my zone anymore. Okay. So when those things happen, it's kind of a little bit of a counterintuitive process, but what happens is, as we try to escape all of those really hurtful, critical, hard parts, you're too old, you're, not good enough, you're not, strong enough, it's not going to work for you, like all those things, because we don't want to feel those. We tend to, kind of sweep them away in one way or another. Sometimes we do it with trying to throw on a lot of positive thoughts. Oh, I think I froze. Did I freeze? Okay. Sometimes we do it by, now. Okay. Yeah. Hold on. My internet connection was unstable, it said.
Oh gosh.
That could be why we couldn't stream onto Facebook, because every neighborhood's using more bandwidth.
Everybody's on right now. I keep telling my son, he keeps saying YouTube is buffering. I said, Bud, there are so many people on YouTube right now, Bud. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. But anyway, so we will do it even with good intentions of trying to take positive action or say positive things to ourselves or whatever. But what happens is the crud from that criticism hasn't really been worked out.
Yeah.
And so it's really kind of like, skinning your knee, and you get a scab on, and just as about the time it's about to heal, you peel that scab off and it's bleeding again, And so you never get to have new skin, which is what we're made for, right? New skin.
Well, and to your point, it's exact, and it's. I mean, you kind of nailed it for me. Like, my thought was like, if I negative this away, it'll cement the fact that I'll forget about it, and it won't. It's just a chapter in my life. But it really did. It did affect me as much as I wanted to say it didn't. It just did, because it's like you said, you have a goal. You want to get to this level, and you're here, and you failed. But you nailed it by saying that. It's just.
Yeah, and it's super common. I mean, it's pretty much what all of us do. We're not taught really how to do anything very different, just to either get sucked into the negative or, cover it up with the positive and move on, right? There's all this, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and move on. Yeah. But then what happens is other things in life, then it's not gone, it's not healed. And so it comes out again.
Yes.
And it's sometimes very inconvenient. At times.
It's never convenient.
Yeah. So if we were to take that, so the words you used were that you failed and you'll never be able to do it.
Yeah.
And then you also said you're going to be too old.
Sure.
Yeah. So So now what I want to do is I want to take you through a little bit of a process that I do, okay? Oftentimes when I work with people, and I've done it 1,000,005 times myself. And what we're going to do now, the sort of dynamic we're dealing with is that we all have in common is that all that anxiety and all those critical thoughts, those are very habituated, right? Like that wasn't the first time you said I failed.
No.
I'm too old or too something, not smart enough, whatever. And I'm not going to be able to. So that gets to be like a record, well, for anybody who remembers records, that gets to be something that just plays over and over, and it's a habit.
Sure.
No different than brushing our teeth or whatever. So when you get in the car now, you do not think about how to drive. You don't get in the car like it's a new day and you've never been behind the wheel. Okay. And that's great when it comes to getting behind the wheel or brushing our teeth and a lot of other things we do. But in our thoughts, it's not great, and it doesn't really
Yeah.
serve us, because things will trigger anything that's even remotely similar. And I'm sure when you go back to these weight issues and the teasing you got and the ridicule
Yeah.
and the bullying you got, there were similar words
Oh,
to
sure.
never gonna,
Sure.
never gonna
Of course.
this, you failed, because
Yeah.
you're too big, you're too,
Mhm.
and so those things get imprinted, especially when we're in elementary school. I mean, children, until they're about 7 to 9, somewhere in there, it's a little different for everybody, don't even have their analytical mind
Yeah.
to separate, and start to see, people who are getting shot on TV aren't actually dead. That's not real blood. Like, that's why little kids, get scared by things, because
Yeah, of course.
they can't sort out because they don't have an analytical mind. So especially things that start to happen before our analytical mind really kicks in, or when it's very young, we absorb those things as just absolute total truth. It's just true, so if you're abused, if you're bullied, people who see others being abused, like who grow up with parents that are abusing each other, grandparents, whatever, any kind of trauma around them. This is why when we're little kids, you can have a situation where, like, a dog runs, you're walking down the street, a dog runs out, scares the shit out of you, and for the rest of your life, you're scared of dogs. Even though as an adult, you're like, silly, I'm a lot bigger than he is, and
Yeah.
but no matter how much you try to convince yourself with logic
Yeah.
that you shouldn't be afraid, which is what happens when we positive spin something that's hurtful. Well, I just got to get over this. I have a lot of good things in my life. I should be grateful for this and all of that. Like, that's the downside of that, is that if we use it to cover up the hurt without healing the hurt, then we carry that with us to be open, for that wound to be opened again.
Yeah.
So when we want to change a habit, like changing any habit is hard, right? Like, thank God, I've always said, thank God I was never a smoker, because I think smoking is one of the really hard things to give up. But whatever it is, whether it's an eating habit, a shopping habit, a drinking habit, biting your fingernail, like, it doesn't matter what it is, okay? Any kind of habit, even if it's good for you, a good for you habit, is hard to break. And so these thoughts we have, everything okay back there?
My daughter popped in the office.
Life is going on. That's okay.
Life is going on. Yeah.
Yeah. So this negative cluster of thoughts, right?
Yeah.
You failed. It's too late. You're not going to be able to do it. You're too this, you're too that, all of those are a habit. And so to break them, what we want to do is slow the mind down, so that it isn't, we're just interrupting that fast fire of those thoughts, right? Because they all come rapid fire.
Yeah.
We want to slow that down. And then we want to give our mind something else to do, because the mind is just always active, right? Like, we don't think about thinking. As soon as we wake up, it just starts going, right? Yeah. So we want to interrupt that cycle and give it another assignment, so to speak.
Okay.
And I have found that when I do that over and over, like, it's not usually a one and done, even when I have a little breakthrough, which the breakthroughs are great, but then it's not over. You have to, like, rehearse, what's this new version of me that doesn't respond to that with those same cycle of thoughts. Yeah. So if we take just the one, let's just do you failed. So I'm going to do it in first person for you. So I failed. So take yourself to a situation, and it doesn't matter. It could have been from 10 years ago or 10 minutes ago. It doesn't matter. But just get yourself really anchored in your mind. And if you want to close your eyes, do that, of a situation that happened where you felt you had those words, I failed, came to you in the, midst or the aftermath of the experience, and get something, take a minute if you need to. You can just tell me when you have it, of something really specific, because I want you to be able to like put yourself there. Are you sitting? Are you standing? Are you with a person? Are you, I just want you to be able to anchor yourself in that.
No, I have it.
Okay.
I know the exact moment.
Okay, good. That's excellent. Okay. So stay in that moment. And this is the part about not sugarcoating things. This is the difference between like what I'll say are affirmations that don't work, and actually changing a habit of thought into something that serves you instead of something that wounds you, re-wounds you over and over. So when you're in that spot, and I want you just to sort of, let's just slow it all down. And I'm going to ask you, when you have that thought, I failed in that scenario, and you're looking at that right now, if you could only answer yes or no, no qualifiers, no stories, no ifs, ands, or buts, just yes or no, did you fail?
In that moment, no, I did.
Okay. So in that moment, that thought that you had at that moment of I failed, what you're telling me now is that it wasn't true. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And so tell us just enough of what's happening there for you in that scenario, that you found that spot right now today where you know that that thought I failed is not true.
Because there were positives that came out of the whole situation and the whole scenario, that even though at the moment it might have been a failure, the long-term effects of it were something to be celebrated.
Yeah. Okay. Beautiful. Beautiful. I'm going to write that down. So just just feel that. Just feel in your body what that feels like to reinterpret that judgment of I've failed to this is something to be celebrated. Feels a little different, huh?
It feels much different, and it's just, it's like I said, in the moment you feel like you're an absolute failure. But like I said, in looking back at that moment, it's the things that I learned from it help my both mental awareness, but also like my physical awareness. Out of this whole experience, I had to train myself to run, and now I love running. I can run, 3-4 miles, and feel pretty good about myself.
Wow. Yeah.
So that makes a difference for me and for my family, because I'm going to be able to stay healthy longer.
Yeah.
So I think that that experience at the moment felt pretty horrible, but looking back and putting myself in that moment, it's not so bad.
Yeah. All right. So for a minute, I'm going to have you go back, though, to that moment when it did feel like total failure.
Sure.
And you were in that place. How did you react? How did you behave? What was going on? What was your reaction when you believed the thought that I failed?
It was, at that moment, it was absolute disappointment, because I had been working to what I thought was so hard to achieve that, knowing that I could meet those particular standards of what I was going for. And with that and more so with this moment, I remember, because it was a particular department, I'd already passed part of the application process. So I was on to a different part of the process. So I'd overcome that one hurdle, and I was on to the next one. Yeah. So in that moment, very much disappointed. It was just, the longest drive home I could have, and it was only about 30 minutes, so it wasn't,
Yeah.
you know,
And how
it,
were you treating yourself, so to speak?
I was beating myself up. I was, you could have done more push-ups, or you could have done different stuff this week. Just going through, just rationalizing all the bad stuff, not
Right.
looking at it like, I know what I have to work on. I know what I have to do better, or even the thought. The funny part out of all this is, I don't think until it really came to a head, I really ever thought maybe I should just stop doing this.
Mm.
That never really crossed my mind, because I was so fixed and determined on this being my reality.
Yes. Yes. So you lost, I'm going to put words in your mouth, so tell me if I'm wrong, okay? It sounds to me like you just lost both the idea that other options could be available
Yeah.
to you, or any kind of creative way to either work with what was there or
Yeah.
find something new or whatever. It's just.
Yep. And at the time, it's exactly what it was, Brent. It was, at that time, it was either I would be a police officer for the city, or I would work in Delaware, or I would work with the Pennsylvania police. Like for me, it was like, whatever I could get my foot into is what I was is how I was gonna do. It wasn't like, let me try and pursue something completely different and look at my success that way. It was
Right.
tunnel vision.
Yeah. So a good metaphor for this, and this is what happens to all of us when we get in these, particularly a really high stress situation like that. Our focus gets super narrow on that one thing. And so that's why it's like there's no peripheral vision even, because I am so focused on this. And of course, back in antiquity, that was great, because if a lion was chasing us, being focused on that one thing
It was a good thing.
is just the right thing to do, right?
Sure.
And it's not a time, to rest. It's not a time to be creative. It's not a time to go sit down and have a good meal or hang out with your family or whatever. And so we can't do any of that, right? Like, so when you got home, like, how were you then with the family?
I think I did the best I could. I think I was, that disappointment hung with me for a while, and I would get home and be excited to be home, but I think I was still thinking about it. I think that as much as I was trying to be dad, husband, I was still thinking, oh, man, I could have done this differently. I could have done that, and I think that's where some of the trouble started, was because of that focus. I wasn't focusing on the things I should have been focusing on.
Right. Yeah. And so
or could have put more focus into.
Yeah. And it sounds like, even in just the way you described that again, is there was a lot of comparison. You got got dropped into that comparison.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so, it's the whole, if they can do, if this person's a police
officer,
why can't I? How can I not be? I think I do this to myself when I'm sick of being single, and I'll look at couples and I'll be like, well, fucking A, like, she gets to have somebody, but I can't, like, whatever. Like, it's so irrational, but we all do it,
I know. And it's such a hard habit to break, because you see so many things that are similar to you, but might be what you perceive as a little bit better, but in reality, they might have more bills than you or whatever, so.
Yeah, because the thing is, like, there's nobody who puts their hand up for my life is perfect.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. Nobody. And if they do, they're lying.
Nobody. Okay. All right. So that gives us a good sense of who you are, in this scenario, but also I'm sure you can think of a dozen others where this pattern has happened. And you get that I failed, and you get the disappointment, and you get the tunnel vision into it's got to be this way or no way, or, I'm now comparing myself to others, and we're all stuck in the intensity and the tension of that, right? I'm sure it's very constricting and tight. And
you feel boxed in. You feel like there's nobody out there like you at that moment.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm so glad you said that. Boxed in, and there's no one else like you out there. Oh my gosh, that is the quintessential. Everybody in the world relates to that.
Yes.
Because it's so isolating, isn't it? You just feel so isolated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then for me, what tend to happen is I get to that place, and then that's when I would lash out. And
Okay.
I might take it out on my wife. I might take it out on the kids, and they just want to do something as simple as play. But I'm just annoyed because I'm in that space. And that's one thing that I've really worked on is that piece of that puzzle.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Okay. So now what I want you to do is we're going to shift the story now, and
Mm-hmm.
we're going to give you some new superpowers.
Okay, wonderful.
So this is I wave my magic coaching wand, and we're in the exact same scenario, okay? And the
Sure.
exact same thing happens.
Mm-hmm.
And the only difference is you have no thought that it's a failure. No thought. So now you might even have, like, that might be a little hard to imagine even.
Sure.
But so sometimes when I do this, I really have to think about someone else that I respect, even if it's a celebrity kind of person,
Mm-hmm.
And be like, okay, now wait a minute. Like when I was having a lot of business frustrations and some serious financial challenges last year, I read that Elon Musk, of SpaceX and Tesla, all
Yeah.
that he, I think in 2010, but whatever, not that long ago, almost went bankrupt because every rocket he was sending, this was because of SpaceX, all the rockets he was sending up were blowing up,
Blowing up.
and everybody just thought he was a lunatic,
Mm-hmm.
and he was about to file bankruptcy, and then some billionaire bailed him out so he didn't have to. But I kept thinking, okay, like what would Elon Musk think? I tried this and that and they didn't work. But he's blown up a bazillion rockets and he just keeps going after it, and now of course they've had tons and tons of success. My son-in-law actually works for them. But what was he thinking? So that's what we're going for here.
Yeah.
Same scenario, but you don't have the thought that I'm a failure and all the other cluster of things that come with that. You don't have any of that. In that exact same scenario, how do you think you would have reacted and behaved?
If I wasn't feeling, if the failure wasn't there, I think, like I said, I think it would be, okay, I'll try harder, I'll do this different. And then my thought would be kind of wash my head, get home, and envelop myself and my family and be the best person I could be, as a husband, as a father, rather than come home and just sit in this dark place. So I think to some degree it would be, if I'm enveloping myself and my family, that's the right distraction I should be having, because those are the ones who at the end of the day, regardless of what happens, status, whatever, they're going to love me regardless and want to just naturally comfort me and just want to be with me.
Yeah.
So I think that's what rightfully should have happened.
Yeah. Yeah. So I love that. I love how can you feel how that feels so different in your body to just.
Yeah. I mean, these people love me. These people love me unconditionally,
Yeah.
Kids especially. They don't,
Yeah. Yeah. Kids. I mean, their dad's a hero no matter what, right?
Yeah. Regardless of what you do.
Yeah. Yeah. So I love that. I love that you thought of it that way. I love that you use the word envelop. I mean, I think that's just such a beautiful word because when we've had, it's not as if there would be no disappointment. I mean, you went after something.
Yes.
You worked hard and you didn't get it. So the disappointment, the problem is not the feeling of disappointment. The problem is the thought of I'm a failure.
Yes.
Because I'm a failure then anchors that disappointment and it can't subside. It can't go anywhere. And in fact, it's going to just grow.
Yeah.
Because now it's being fed.
Breaking that chain on that anchor is still a tough part, because you just, like you said at the beginning of the call, we all handle stress differently and anxiety differently.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of finding that tool that helps do that,
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me, and you've kind of given me some of these, but let's go as if we replayed this. And
Mm-hmm.
instead of I failed, the thought that came to your head was I succeeded, or that was a success, whatever way. So maybe you feel the disappointment, but then the following thought was, okay, well, that was a success because, and now give me like 3 or 4 reasons that like are super legit, not bullshit, that experience was a success for you.
I think the main huge reason looking back is that I think it started putting me on the downside of this whole experience where I should have refocused myself into my family, into my career. So I think ultimately coming out of it, it refocused me to at least begin to try and be a better person, to be more attentive to my family, to be trying to succeed at my job, to provide for them. So I think that's the real big legitimate thing is it refocused me onto the other parts of my life that were not being attended to.
Yeah.
Which is so important with 2 young children who, like you said, regardless of what you do, mom and dad are their heroes. That was the big thing. And I still to this day struggle with that. And I know that my kids love me, but sometimes it's a struggle.
Yeah.
But to that point, like really coming out of this experience and even just up to this conversation, you still just have to kind of get out from underneath all that stuff. And that's what kind of helped me kick in this direction and find happiness elsewhere.
Yeah. So I'm a success. Give me another reason why that's true.
I think it also taught me about being more physically aware. So going back to the weight issue,
Okay.
I still carry around a little bit of extra weight, but I have the tools and the knowledge and the ability to control that and to to really kind of reel that in. So like I said, I got out of it the exercise. I love running now. I do really enjoy going out for a run.
Awesome.
I don't get to weight lift as often as I used to, given the circumstances. But it taught me the physical aspect of it, of how to take better care of myself and to be more active, because that's such an important piece. My son plays 2 different sports. My daughter wants to run around, so just keeping up with them is crazy sometimes. So
right.
So that's a second huge thing is my health.
Yeah. Beautiful. All right. I'm a success. What else? What else makes that true?
Rebuilding my confidence was definitely a huge one. Like I said, it's something I struggle with all the time. And I think it's a lot of self-perpetuated self-doubt, of being success. But at this point in my life where I am now professionally, I'm feeling much more confident. I'm back in an industry that I love. I get to work with people. I'm also a adjunct faculty member, so I'm teaching a class.
Oh, cool.
And that's a new experience for me. So that kind of, I've never taught before. So that for me was a completely different experience that helped my confidence because I had to build an entire course that had never been taught before.
Right.
So that was a challenge, but it was a nice challenge.
Yeah.
So I think this whole that experience brought me back into the idea that this space professionally, because you spend so much time in your job, makes me happy, and I come home a happier person because of the organization and what I'm doing.
Yeah. And so and I can feel this really in your energy right now, but just allow yourself to sort of sink into the truth of this I'm a success statement,
Yeah.
and really feel that in your whole body,
Yeah.
that yes, there was this setback,
Mhm.
there was this thing that you
Mhm.
worked for really hard and you didn't get,
Yeah.
and we can choose to interpret that still as a success.
Mhm.
And if you feel that, can you allow that, or can you kind of sink into it in a way that you can look at a lot of things in your life, and from that perspective start to feel that legitimate confidence, not the kind of blown up confidence that comes from comparing ourselves to somebody who's worse and we're like, oh yeah, I'm good at that because I can do more than they can, because that's kind of a puffery sort of,
Yeah.
that it's an
Last
easily
long.
deflated
Yes.
confidence. It's not
Yeah.
real confidence. Whereas real confidence, the kind of confidence that neutralizes anxiety, is knowing that you can go to this place where you can say, hey, wait a minute, I might have forgotten it for the last little bit,
Mhm.
but I have this man inside of me that is a success.
Yeah.
He knows how to take a disappointment
Mhm.
and make it into something that helps him take care of himself by
Yeah.
going and being enveloped by his family who loves him.
And I,
Knows how to
oh,
take care of himself by saying, oh, okay, I probably could have done this different or that different, or, whatever. Okay, that's cool. But
yeah.
minus all the beating up,
Mhm.
no beating up, just that sort of objective. Or, maybe not. Maybe I couldn't really have done it any different. I've given it my best shot. The answer
Mhm.
was no. And so now I'm just ready to move on and focus this energy on
Yeah.
something new and exciting, you
Mhm.
know and this part of you that just knows every experience in life is going to bring you that kind of gift, like the running,
Yeah.
or like being able to really focus your family, your energy with your family the way you want
Mhm.
it to, and that it does, each one of those build your confidence instead of tearing it down. Like
Yeah.
when you're in that place, can you kind of feel the um, groundedness, or sort of the solidity, how solid you feel in that?
It's a better confidence because I'm happier, and you feel like you just feel different. I don't know how to describe it per se,
Yes.
but you feel different.
Yes. Yeah.
It's hard to put a finger on, but you feel a little bit like it's weird. You feel taller. You feel like you're doing what you were meant to do, or what makes you happiest.
Yeah.
And like I said, with this new experience, with getting back in a profession I love, I was given the opportunity to do something that was out of my comfort zone, but has been a huge confidence builder because I can stand in front of a group of 16 students who have no idea about the content I'm teaching, but I'm that expert at the time.
Yeah.
And then you start getting the conversation, the back and forth, and you're like, wow, this is really landing. So for me, that was a huge confidence builder.
Yes.
This
Yes.
whole thing, it came 180, and it really kind of it's made me a happier person.
Yeah.
But readdressing those other issues have also kind of, it hurts a little bit, but at the same time, you need to bring that soot up, or that dirt, that crud you were talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah. So if you were to go back now to that little boy that got, ridiculed for being, big, what would you have to tell him? Like, what would you, if you could just go back and sort of be his
Sure.
ideal parent, what would you tell him?
I think what I would tell that little boy is that, you know, to some degree, life has a plan for you. It might stink right now, but just keep your head up. Focus on your goals, and I think for a kid, focus on being a kid. Don't let that stuff get you down. I say it to my son all the time. My daughter too. Like, you know, something little might upset them, but
Yeah.
like, let's refocus. Let's find something else that makes you happy. Something else we can do. Uh, to find happiness to get out of that situation.
Yeah.
And I think I was lucky. I wasn't, bullied so terribly, but it definitely hurt. But I would definitely tell that child that, keep your head up,
Yeah.
be confident, use your size to your advantage and be confident and, broaden up your shoulders and just, and be happy and smile.
Yeah. 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 That's beautiful. And so when the next thing comes along, because it will,
Of course.
that and it may not be as big as this was a big life event, right? But
Yeah.
because these dynamics repeat themselves in very small ways and,
Yeah.
and, then also in big ways and everything in between. So if you were to think about something that could be coming up,
Yeah.
that has this chance, or maybe you're not even thinking about what it would be right now. That's not really important, but just that idea of, okay, if I were to be in that situation again, if I were to be in this situation again, where I worked really hard for something I didn't get, basically,
Mm-hmm.
what would I want to say to myself? Like, how would you re-script this story?
I would tell myself that, knowing me, that I put in the work beforehand to be successful. So there's that piece there, that I wasn't just going into it blindly. I was doing the work, I was prepping, whatever.
Yeah.
And I think depending on what the situation was, I would just have to roll with the results. I mean, not everything is going to come out in your favor every time.
Yeah.
Things are not always going to be positive. You might not get the test scores you want. You might not get the okay from your manager to do a certain project, that sort of thing. So for me, I think that the takeaway is don't let the negative results dictate my entire future.
Yes.
Figure out what from that situation I can take that is a positive and develop that, and then either try again or make another approach.
Yeah, that is so good. And I also want to just say, like, again, the feeling that comes with that kind of thing. So disappointment, is the common one.
Yeah.
But whatever else, it could be anger. It could be, there could be other feelings that come with that.
Mhm.
To allow that, right? To allow, okay, like, I worked really hard on this. It didn't happen. I'm disappointed. Like, okay, that's okay.
Yeah.
And all these other things you just said are true. The way you reframed that. And, some other opportunity is going to be ahead, or there's something for me to gain here, or, now let me focus on how do I want to take care of myself? What's a healthy way, to take care of myself? Because the problem is not the feeling. And that's what happens a lot. We get connected to the hurt, so to speak.
Yeah.
And that becomes the thing we're running from. And in the running from it, we're creating all these mental scripts for ourselves.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's blaming other people. Sometimes it's just turning it all in and blaming ourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever. But we're discharging those feelings, with thoughts about ourselves, thoughts about other people. The feeling isn't the problem. It's the thoughts. The thoughts are the problem, not the feeling. The feeling will go through your body. If it's allowed, a feeling will process through your body in really a couple of minutes and would just naturally begin to dissipate, except that we keep it alive by feeding it with all those thoughts.
Exactly.
So what you'll want to play with now moving forward is whenever the next thing hits, even if it's just, and a lot of times the really small ones, of course, are the easier ones. Some disappointment with the kids, or, with Jen, or whatever, that you can do this. So I love the interruption of the question, is it true?
Yeah.
Right? Because whatever that is, those negative thoughts that are coming at us, those critical thoughts that are coming at it, even blame for somebody else. She shouldn't have, he shouldn't have, is it true? And that question will make me just kind of, I've learned to get it to slow me down and be that interruption.
Okay.
And even when it's other focused, and I say, whatever, they shouldn't have, or, it could be abroad, like a coronavirus, this shouldn't be happening. We shouldn't have to shelter in place. Okay. Is it true? And then just stop the 100-mile-an-hour chatter that comes from that.
Comes out of it, yeah.
And get to that quiet place and go, wait a minute. How do I know that that's true?
Yeah.
Because maybe, and part of this goes to, we aren't God, right? So who am I to say what you should be doing, what the environment should be doing, I don't know that there's not a greater plan, even if the short term is painful.
Sure.
Right? We tend to just interpret anything that's painful as bad.
Yes.
But we can look over history and in our own lives, and we know that that's not true.
Yeah, of course.
So maybe that's also not going to be true with this terrible thing.
Yes. That's a good way. It's a great way of looking
so it helps you break that, and then you can start to get creative, because as soon as you can break that pattern a little bit, you can at least start to travel towards something more creative. Okay, if I didn't have that thought, I'm still sheltering in place, I still can't do what I want to do. I said, we're not denying reality. Or I get a bad diagnosis, or I get fired, whatever. Is it whatever I'm saying about how fucked up it all is, whatever, is that true? Is it absolutely only yes or no? And that's where you start to realize your mind is rationalizing all kinds of things. Well, but if this, then that, and if then, and if we can cut through that bullshit and just interrupt that and say, okay, and my new favorite question I've been working with for about 6 months or a year is, what is seeking to emerge? Because there's no judgment in that. And it kind of assumes that whatever is happening for me, for us collectively, and not like victim, as a victim, it's happening to me, right? There's no power in being a victim. There's no power in I failed. That's why we can't be creative. That's why there's no solutions. There's no power in it. But when we can get to, it's happening for me, and out of this crap of a situation, what could be seeking to emerge? What is there here for me to see? What's here for me to see differently? What's a new perspective I could take on that? How could this be? You're doing it with your kids, because I've seen the Facebook posts. How can we get lessons virtually at home?
Yeah.
And boom, and whatever, a day or two. That was really fast. That little girl is dancing on the living room floor, So if all you and Jen had done would be like, oh my gosh, this is horrible, and more horrible, and our kids are just going to be more horrible and more, she wouldn't have even had the thought, why don't I just put something out on Facebook? Right? And that's how there's a lightness to it, instead of the heaviness that keeps you penned in, like you were saying. Really puts you in that box. Whenever you're in that box,
tool.
Yeah,
it really gives me that tool to before I really start to do that spiral. To break it up and reevaluate and say, okay, what positive comes out of the situation? And I think that's one of the things that I strive to be more like Jen in that, because she didn't let this whole thing get the best of her. And it gets the best of you regardless of how you split it. But we've done the best we could, and I think that idea of what you're saying is what is seeking to emerge really kind of breaks that flow of bad energy and says, okay, let's flip it and do something different and look positive at it.
And
I get that 100%. That makes so much sense.
So, and that's why I love the word possibility, because that's all I need. If I can just get a possibility, it may not even be quote unquote positive, but if it's a little better than where I was, it starts moving me in that right direction. And so for you, and I've done this as well, like that being in a box, Like, I know that feeling, those words resonate with me very deeply. And when I get there, that's where I'm like phoning a friend or something. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm in a box about this and I cannot see any way out.
Yeah.
And that's why, whether it's coaching or group events or a great spouse, great friends, but you want to be careful about who you ask it to, right? Because you don't want somebody who's just going to be answering out of their own little box. But hopefully,
no, that makes sense.
Yeah, we all have somebody we can go to be like, fuck, I am stuck.
Yeah.
I'm in a box. All I can see are 3 different bad ways this is going to turn out. And I need help out of it. Yeah.
For sure. 100%. And that just, I have a couple people like that.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Good friends that just kind of will, help me pull myself out of that box if I can. So,
yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you. I think this has
been awesome. This has been great, Brenda. Thank you so much.
You did great work.
I appreciate it.
And just, so use that. Go over when if you have some time, like think through of, a couple of top stressful times in your life, and kind of go back to them and allow yourself to heal through those messages and those thoughts with that, is it true? And then reimagine the situation as who would I be without that thought? Same situation, but I don't have the thought. And find those ways that loosens it up and a new way to define yourself. It really is a new way to rewrite history, and it works.
Yeah.
And then rehearsing the forward part. Like, so now if this when the next time something like this happens, here's how I'd love to respond. Here's what I want to do. And really think, so that's the way it gives your mind that not even positive, like positive versus negative, but productive. That's a better way to say it. Like that productive way that's going to serve you and raise you up instead of bring you down like all the chatter of criticism does. Yeah. Because the mind's going to be busy. It's just what's it going to be busy on, So
that's a great point. Yeah.
Go find 50 ways I'm fantastic, Okay, now I got a mission, so.
This is great, Brenda. Thank you so much. I appreciate
thank you. Thank you for your gift to our community with this. And I really, really appreciate it. And I'm super grateful.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. All right.
You too. Bye.